Many couples start out wanting to start a family, but difficulties often make it difficult. IVF procedures used to be expensive and hard to come by, but medical advances make them cheaper and more available. Many couples that have been left without many options usually find their dreams coming true thanks to some incredible donors. The Coombs. Around 25,000 couples in the United States have used surrogate mothers since 1976, and this number is only growing as science advances. In many cases, couples who can't have children on their own will use family members as surrogates. Joe and Paul Combs' sister-in-law heroically stepped up to the plate to be a surrogate for them. After Joe had spent 10 years trying to conceive and had struggled through 10 rounds of in vitro fertilization and tragically 2 miscarriages, Caroline offered to act as a surrogate for them. Sadly, their one remaining embryo resulted in an ectopic pregnancy. The couple might have decided to quit there, as it would seem that there was no hope. Science has come far, but many would see this as a sign. The Coombs were ever decided not to stop trying. They knew there was another way, and they began to research their options. They wanted a child of their own, at least partly. Although they thought that adoption and fostering were lovely, they did not want to go that route. Eventually, they found a solution when Caroline volunteered to come forward. Caroline volunteered her own eggs, and the couple used Paul's sperm to conceive. The couple had the fingers crossed that everything would work this time. If they did not manage to make it work, they thought that perhaps it really would be the end of the world and they wouldn't be able to have a child of their own after all, even carried outside of the womb. However, a miracle occurred, and Caroline soon came to tell them the good news. Joe and Paul were overwhelmed with happiness when they heard she was pregnant and that the pregnancy was viable. Their son, Charlie, was finally born on March 30th, 2009. Tina Cade. Another astonishing story is that of Tina Cade, who volunteered to act as a surrogate for her own daughter Camille, who suffered from endometriosis, a condition which affects the lining of the uterus and makes it difficult to become pregnant. After 5 rounds of unsuccessful IVF, Tina Cade came up with an idea. At age 55 and postmenopausal, Kate suggested that she carry Camille's baby to term. The embryos took, and Kate gave birth to 3 children on her daughter's behalf. The pregnancy was difficult on her physically, with Kate confined to a wheelchair some of the time, but she took strength in reminding herself of her purpose, and all 3 children were born happy and healthy. Now teenagers, Kate's grandchildren consider the birth a normal part of their own stories, and Kate considers it all a part of her job as a loving parent. Liz Stringer. Then there's Liz Stringer, the Welshman, who is the single mother of 2 daughters of her and has given birth to 6 surrogate babies, all for different women. The laughter of pregnancies was in 2010 at the age of 47. When Stringer was 20, a close friend of hers had been left infertile by cervical cancer. The experience left her desperate to help those who found themselves unable to conceive or carry a child to term. In 1997, Stringer carried a child for a couple who had been trying to conceive for over 20 years. Her second surrogate pregnancy was for a woman who had been through 11 miscarriages. Her third was for a woman who lost her pregnancy and womb in an auto accident. Since then, Stringer has had children for 3 other couples and maintained that the process of surrogacy helps make her a better parent to her own 2 children. She works with an organization which brings surrogates and families together and has always waived her own fee. She does it, she says, because the joy she experiences from the families is infectious. The Baritinas. Nicole and Kevin Baritinas had always wanted a child, but were unable to conceive. Since childhood, Nicole had suffered from a dangerously low blood platelet count and was diagnosed with a condition called TTP, or a thrombocytopenic purpura. The condition causes tiny, potentially life-threatening blood clots to form throughout the body. Eventually, doctors were able to find a medication which enabled her to live more or less normally. However, she was still subject to occasional TTP episodes. In the best instances, Nicole is exhausted for days during TTP episodes. At worst, she may have to be hospitalized for up to 10 days and receive platelet exchanges. At the age of 29, Nicole had been dealing with her TTP for over 10 years. She married husband Kevin in 2010, and they started planning the family they had always dreamed of. When Nicole discovered that her TTP could make pregnancy life-threatening, the medication she was taking to control her TTP would be damaging for any infant carried. In order to sustain a healthy pregnancy, she would have to go off her medication, which would then leave her at risk for blood clots at an incredibly vulnerable time. Her doctors judged that the risk was too great. Most women with TTP were either unable to carry a child to term or shattered their own health in the process. It was news that no young family wants to hear. Sadly, Nicole and Kevin realized that they would never be able to have a child of them. For a while, Nicole contemplated risking your health so that they could have a child, but Kevin refused to agree to the risk. Her life was not worth sacrificing in order to have a child. The couple then tried to adopt, but had to give up when the process was too expensive. There are so many legal fees required for processing adoptions, with travel fees included, as well as agency fees. Domestic adoptions can cost at least a few $1,000s, and international adoptions many times more than that. It looked as though the couple might never have the family they dreamed of. However, in a moment of hope, Nicole froze her eggs. Her TTP condition was not genetic, and she would not pass her autoimmune disorder onto any children she might have with the eggs. However, the possibility of surrogacy seemed remote. She had heard stories about families who had a sister or even a mother carry for them, but she had no sister, and her mother was over the age where it would be safe to attempt. Nicole and Kevin were unsure where to turn. Paid surrogacy is not legal in New York, so the couple considered looking outstate. However, they ran into the same issues they had when they had been considering adoption. The average price for surrogacy in between $98,000 to $140,000. It was too expensive. However, New York does allow families to use what they call a gestational carrier, essentially an unpaid surrogate, unconnected to the child by genetics. But how do you ask someone, whether a friend or stranger, to carry your child for free? Nicole knew that even in the better circumstances, there was always the risk of a surrogate mother bonding too much with the child to then be able to hand it over, especially if the arrangement was taking place on a voluntary basis. Still, Nicole and Kevin were astonished by the number of friends who tried to help them. Several people they knew offered to carry their child. Sadly, each and every one of their volunteers was rejected by doctors as unfit. The process of vetting gestational carriers is incredibly rigorous, and any volunteer must go through an incredibly rigorous set of physical and mental tests to be deemed a healthy match. It was a big choice, after all, and not one that could be made lightly. Choosing would affect the rest of everyone's life. Enter the Fives family. Fives had been friends with Kevin for about 15 years and knew about Kevin and Nicole's desire to have a child. His wife, Lena, was also a supportive friend to the Baritinas, but the Fives are growing their own family and pregnant with their own children. Secretly, Lena knew that when the time was right, she would offer to help. In 2016, the Fives are raising fittingly 5 children, and it was clear that this was the time. Nicole and Kevin were ecstatic. The couples opted for gestational surrogacy, where an embryo is created between the mother's egg and father's sperm with IVF, making the baby biologically theirs, then implanted in the surrogate mother. However, the first embryo with the couples tried didn't take, neither did the second one. Everyone was starting to worry that the Baritinas' dream would be unfulfilled after all. However, in July, the miracle finally occurred and the pregnancy took. Both families were over the moon. One advantage that the Baritinas had, given that their surrogate was such a close friend, was that they could be present for the pregnancy. They were all able to attend doctor's appointments together, and Nicole and Kevin felt that they were able to be present every step of the way through the pregnancy. They also had the comfort of knowing that their baby was in the good hands of their best friends. It also meant that there were 4 people rather than 2 excited for the birth of this child, which really did seem like a miracle. There was one more miracle to come. When the doctors announced that Lena was pregnant, it was with twins. 2 embryos had taken, and the Baritinas would be the parents to 2 children, not just one. Some couples might be overwhelmed by that news, but they were overjoyed. After trying for so long, it seemed like they were being doubly rewarded. They could not believe their luck. The couples planned a joint party on Labor Day and announced to over 60 guests, both family and friends, the good news. Their families were delighted for them, but no one could be happier than Nicole and Kevin. Finally, on February 10th, 2017, the big day came, and Dominic and Luciana Baritinas were born. Lena and Sean were of course named their godparents. The families remain close, turn to each other for guidance, and really are an extended family to each other. And both families are trying to help others by campaigning for the legal recognition of surrogacy in New York. so that other families might have the happy ending which they have been able to realize through the generosity of their friends. I really hope that you enjoy these inspiring stories. They brought a tear to the eye. We hope to see you again soon.